Okay, so this is a little bit longer. What do you see repeated throughout here, just glancing through it? Repeated or referring to?
Amnesty.
Okay, yeah, Amnesty International. Okay, it's always kind of easy to, I mean, easier than other things. It's always kind of easy to, like we did with Frances Wright and Neshoba, it's kind of easy to see a proper noun. In other words, somebody's name or a company name, especially initials. But this we see 3 times, which is a good hint. And remember what we're looking for, especially in our first reading, is the person, place, event, or idea repeatedly mentioned or referred to. It never pops up and then disappears. It's a constant presence. Okay, so this looks pretty constant. Again, you may do this, like if you had picked up the word insect in that one about the Venus flytrap, yes, it goes all the way through, but it's not about insects. Okay, so do we see a reversal transition?
No.
Usually the reversal transition's up here. Sometimes we've seen one down here, but usually it's up in, at least in the first quarter. No, there's no reversal transition. So we look at the first sentence. Amnesty International was formed in 1961 to protect human rights throughout the world. Okay. Do we see a list? Yeah.
No, not, I was, human rights,
Yeah.
I was comparing that with civil rights.
Good connection, yeah. This is an interesting connection. Yeah, something you might ask yourself. This is protecting human rights, so what's the difference between human rights and civil rights? Or is there? Yeah, that's a question you can, that's exactly what I want you to do. Write a question. And here's another thing about these questions that you ask yourself. As we talked about, usually in a skills class, we probably won't come back to this. We might, but with chances are we won't come back to this question. We probably won't come back to the question of how old is the Mennonite religion? Is it as old as the Vikings? Okay, but when you are checking over your journal for length and you find that you're a little short on some topics, okay, remember that you can use the vocabulary lists, but there's another thing that you can fill in. And I think I have a copy of the journal assignment sheet, or maybe not. There's another thing that you can use to fill in your journal. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? You can use the vocabulary list, or your own responses to the readings we do in class. That's one we haven't talked about very much. So you have to write 150 words on each one of the topics, and if you don't, you can write a little bit on this. You have to respond to this in some way. But if you don't fill up 150 pages on this, then you can do some 150 words. I knew as the minute I said it, that wasn't right. Yes, that'll be the next class. Okay. You could go do some research on this and write something about what you find out if you're interested in these things. So if you're interested, how is human rights different from civil rights? So by all means, go and find the answer to that question and write down some information about it in your journal. That's where you can put things like that, okay? Okay, so is there anything that says Amnesty International does 5 different things, or there are a number of goals that it has? There isn't really an introduction to a list here, but there is a kind of a list created by British lawyer Peter Benenson. It now has more than 1 million members. Members work to help people who face unjust imprisonment, unfair trials, torture, or execution. The main goal of Amnesty International is to assist those who have been punished for their political belief. For example, okay, so here's the first thing we get that even looks like it might be a list, okay? It successfully engineered the release of Rabia Kadir. She had been convicted of leaking secret information because she sent newspaper clippings to her husband in the United States. Can you imagine being arrested for sending newspaper clippings? That would be more like you guys forwarding something, finding an article online and forwarding it to someone. She was arrested for doing that. It helps people like Kadir by publicizing their cases, appealing to authorities, and arranging for legal defense. It also exposes human rights violations, encourages government to change laws, and conducts campaigns to educate the public. Okay. What do people pick for this? What did
B
you
or
pick?
C?
Okay. Is it about this lady, Rabia Kadir? Kadir, she, Kadir? No. She goes through a good part of it, but she doesn't go from the beginning to the end. Is it about human rights in general? Okay, it is, that's the thing, it is, but a better answer, okay, it does talk about human rights, okay? All of this stuff, unjust imprisonment, unfair trials, torture, execution, that refers to human rights, okay? The release of this woman refers to human rights, okay? Their cases refers to the human rights cases. All this stuff refers to human rights. But here's the other thing we have to look at, okay, on this little checklist, okay? The topic should be general enough to include everything discussed in the program, but specific enough to include what isn't. You have to kind of think about that, what that means for a minute. It needs, so we're thinking, okay, human rights is pretty general. So maybe that's general enough to include everything discussed. Yes. But is it specific, is human rights specific enough to exclude what isn't discussed? And what's not discussed in this paragraph are the other organizations that work for human rights. Does that make sense? So this is a good guess, but a better answer is that it really is just talking about what Amnesty International is. There are other organizations that work for human rights, and some of them also exist. But this is talking specifically about Amnesty International. Does that make sense? It needs to be broad enough to talk about what is there, but specific enough that it doesn't cover what isn't. And the only organization this talks about is Amnesty International. All these things refer to it too. Members, it. So could you make a list? This is one of those that's kind of more organized in parts. What are the parts? Here's one part. Does it give us another example? It gives us the example of Rabia Kadir. Do we have, does it say form another example?
No.
No. So there's one example, and that looks like a pretty big chunk of the paragraph is one example. What does this part of it tell us?
The creator,
What?
the creator. of-
Yeah, this kind of tells us the history and the purpose. So this is kind of the introduction, when it was created, how many members it has, what they do. Then it gives an example, and then what's this part? Actually, this part. There's a list, huh? That's a long list of stuff. Here's a list, and here's a list. So this is more of its purpose. So we have a brief introduction, then an example, and then some more things that it does. Okay, you kind of, once you get something like this, the list is right in this sentence. Same thing here, unjust imprisonment, unfair trials, torture, execution. If the list is already in a sentence, you don't have to, you can if you want, but you don't really have to list all that stuff out there. This is one where it's more important to recognize that it's in 3 parts, an introduction, an example, and then more information about what it does. Does that make sense as far as your notes? Try to recognize, like I say, a list can be something like this, but it can the list can also just be 3 main chunks. So we'll see some of them that look like that. Okay, 3 or 2 or whatever. Okay. What do you see? Do you see anything repeated throughout here?
Love.
Yes, love is repeated, looks like love is repeated throughout here, especially at the beginning. What does it mean? This is something we haven't talked about, I think, in here. I can't remember whether we have or not. What does it mean usually in an academic textbook, which remember, that's where these things come from, when the word is in italics like this. Here's another italics. Anyone know what that means? It's italic or bold. Does anyone know what to look for in a textbook? Usually when this happens in a textbook, and she doesn't give us where this comes from, but I would say this is from a philosophy textbook, just off the top of my head. Usually when you see a word like that in italics, what the paragraph is going to do is define it. This paragraph is probably giving us a definition. That's another pattern. We're talking about pattern. It's giving us a definition of love. Okay. Do you see? So we see that repeated. And then we go down here and there isn't a choice that just says love. Right? We have to get a little bit more specific. So do you see a reversal transition? It's a little bit lower in the paragraph. Yeah. Here's a reversal transition. Okay. So did anybody pick D as the answer? What did people do if they picked D? What mistake did they make? They read only down to the first couple of sentences. They didn't read past the reversal transition. So this is just the introduction to give you the idea of why we have just one word, why we use it. We love the music of Aretha Franklin, we love Del Donuts, we love our parents. Okay, we don't think of different words for that. The ancient Greeks, in contrast, or more precise, they use different words to identify different kinds. So your question here is, what?
Oh,
What? What's your
What?
question when you get to here? The Greeks use different words.
what word?
Yeah, what words? And does it tell you?
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
arrows and.
Okay, so arrows, and we know this one, right?
Yeah.
From philanthropist, remember philanthropist? And, okay, so that's the list. And this is another clue when you see these three things, agape, okay? So this is friends. What is the town Philadelphia? What does that mean?
Brotherly love.
The city of brotherly love. Exactly, that's what Philadelphia means. Okay? So what's the topic?
B.
Okay, so the Greeks and their worldview, too broad. It doesn't talk about the Greek worldview, it just talks about their words for love. Yeah, Greek words for different loves. Mentions these, but here's another thing I want you to learn to check. Anybody circle C?
The answer's B.
If you did, what I'm gonna tell you is, and I think I did this on a couple of people's papers. When was it? Some other thing. I'm gonna say, this is only 2 of the things on your list. So therefore, it can't be the topic, right? This is, yeah, they're in there, but this is only 2 of 3 things. And this one is the person who only read the first couple of sentences. Does that make sense to people? Okay, so again, this is what I'm looking for. Highlights, you can, same thing here, if we highlight the first line, and as I said, very often the subject of the first line will be the topic, but does that work here? If we did this, is the topic Americans? No. So that doesn't work. Okay. What we find out is this is really, this here is the main idea. The ancient Greeks were more precise, they used different words to identify different kinds. Okay? I think I heard that the Eskimo language, which we don't call Eskimo, I don't know what we call it, Inuits, they have like 30 different words for snow. Because that they, they just have so many meanings of snow. It's interesting. English is very limited. Okay, what about this one? Anybody have trouble with this one? This is a little bit hard because, again, a lot of these answers look right. You notice it went from, you had to pick from 3 and now you have to pick from 4. Okay, what do we see mentioned throughout? Girls and boys, right? Okay. Childhood, children, men, women. Okay, so our topic is again, make notes. They may not be what you end up. You may cross some of them out, like up here. We're gonna, we're not gonna do that. Okay. So, do we have a choice of girls and boys down here? No, that doesn't work. Okay, toward the end of the elementary school years, girls tend to become taller than boys. The difference results from girls earlier puberty. What does that word mean? What age are they talking about here?
What age?
Yeah,
I'm talking about, for girls, is like about 12.
yeah, yeah. So when people start to become adults, okay, that's what that means. Okay.
Actually,
And that's when
not
girls,
to correct you, but puberty means the age of, when your body starts to
Well,
change.
that's what I mean, when your body starts to change into an adult body, when they start to become adults.
and like girls will start their periods.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah, that's what, yeah, there are different ways to think of it, but yeah, you're right.
I'm sorry.
No, you're right, exactly, okay? So yeah, the end of the elementary school years, when people's bodies start to change, when they start to become adults, okay? So they create temporary embarrassment. This is because children become aware of social expectations about attractiveness. So they think men should be taller than women. And what's going on? They get this idea that men should be taller than women, and in sixth grade, all the girls are taller, right? Okay, okay, so, anybody circle A? Height changes? No, that's too narrow, right? What about B? Yeah. B is right. B is the one that covers the whole thing. What about C? Did anybody pick C? It obviously talks about that, but that's too broad, because there's a lot of other stuff connected with that topic that it doesn't go into, right? And what about the stereotypes? Do you see this word anywhere in the reading? What does this word mean, stereotypes?
Comparing.
Okay, this is a
Like labeling
reference
people?
to
Like
the,
labeling people that have the
Yes.
same characteristics, or labeling.
right, so this is a reference to this, right? Social expectations. Right? Is that all it's about? No, it's in there, but that's not all. Okay, so it's basically about height changes at puberty. Okay, the list, what's the list here? I'm looking at the time, I want to get to the other one. I didn't do any highlighting.
The list of like girls and boys, men and women, going through puberty.
Okay, it's another kind of a time list, it's a list of time. Toward the end of the elementary school years, they tend to become taller. Okay, so what is that, 12 or 13? Age 12 or 13, girls are taller. Okay. They create, here's the next step. Embarrassment. They become aware of social expectations.